I want to start by thanking my colleague, Senator Coleman, for the amendment that she just proposed. I do not think it goes far enough, and I will explain why in my remarks on this proposal. This and several other amendments that will be laid out today are the product of a collaboration with some incumbent senior members of this body and some fellow freshman members, such as myself. It was our intent to propose amendments that would make the space more democratic. As I had mentioned in the Judiciary Committee last week, I believe that democracy is not a categorical variable. An institution or a nation state is not democratic or not. It is more or less democratic across a variety of dimensions. The dimension that I want to speak to on this particular amendment is inclusion. The use of norms and rules on attire in practice only serves to exclude. In the domestic context, it has been most closely associated with sexist policies policing what women can wear in general assemblies across our country. In the international context, it is closely associated with the struggle between formerly colonized people and their settler colonists, as made most clear by the Maori struggle with the New Zealand government over ties. Now, I understand that the current version of the rules does not mention ties, and I can appreciate that. But when I submitted the rules for consideration by the chairman and the leadership, I did so despite many of the concerns from my peers who said this is an uphill battle, this is a non-starter, there is no way they're going to consider any of these things, even if they do make the space more democratic. And I thought to myself, well, I've been here for 3 months now. After our first full session on the floor, I have not worn a collared shirt or a jacket, and there has been no problem. So as far as I can see, what I am wearing has not offended anybody. Nobody has brought it up. Nobody has mentioned it. And so if this space were to consider some reforms, some adjustments to this institution, then what better way than to propose simply striking a section that historically has been sexist, in other contexts racist and classist, and that frankly just hadn't been enforced recently. And so I did that as a test to see if the institution was malleable or resistant to change. And what I found is that it struck a chord amongst my peers in the committee, members in this body, and even the general public, none of whom had mentioned dress at all before I proposed removing this rule. Now, it could be that this is about power and conservative nature of institutions. I don't mean conservative as in conservative liberal. I mean conservative as in preserving something just because it is, or that is how it has always been done. But I think it's also struck the nerve of forcing us to interrogate where we get our values and norms from. See, I tried to not be presumptuous and do this through a deliberative conversation. But it seems to be the case that most people assumed that if we remove this rule, the floodgates would be open and people would be in here in all sorts of different dress. In fact, some of the hate mail I received alluded to that. They said I would be in here showing my drawers or dressed completely inappropriately, whatever that means. But I think the part of this that is really relevant for what we represent is how closely the advocates for these norms connected this to the judiciary system and courts. You see, a lot of my colleagues here are lawyers, and many folks said, even defendants dress up when they sit in court because they know that a judge and a jury will be judging whether or not they committed a crime based on how they're dressed. And that worried me because I find it super problematic that we accept it almost as universal, that it is okay to judge people based on how they look. Now, there's a difference between acknowledging how the world works and codifying it in our own institution. We know that people every day are judged based on how they look. That is a fact. It is a social fact that we have data to prove with. That does not mean we have to stamp that and approve it, especially when it's one of our own sister institutions that we know and have many stood by that as an okay, almost universal truth. It is okay to judge people in courts based on how they dress. It is okay to tell people that they cannot participate in the General Assembly based on how they dress. Now, we have a choice. We can strike this. It's archaic. I didn't show up here looking like a clown. Nobody was offended before I brought this up. Or we can codify it, dig our heels in, and prove to the world that we're exactly the hypocrites that we claim not to be in American society. We're constantly telling our kids it's about how hard you work, it's about who you are on the inside. And yet we acknowledge that we live in a world where we're constantly judged based on how we look. Why would we codify that here? Why is that necessary? Whose sensibilities are being insulted? And if it bothers you and makes you uncomfortable to wonder where these things come from, then let's start getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And with that, I move passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to try and make this simple. I'm a common sense type of person. One of the most difficult things that I had to do when I got elected to the Senate, and I was quoted in the Observer, was to trade my Chippewas in for dress shoes. Along with that came suits. I've never owned suits. I never did until I got elected to this position. Me and my wife went out, secondhand shops. I didn't buy new suits. We bought them all secondhand. I still wear them to this day. But the reason I did it is for different reasons than Mr. Acosta mentioned. I do it out of the respect for the institution. It's not about equity. It's not about disenfranchising anybody. It simply, to me, comes down to respect to the institution. And I'm going to hold that, and I don't think we should change these rules because sometimes you have to force respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rogers.
So a moment ago, we just heard very long poetic speech from me regarding Puerto Rico, and we all acknowledged to recognize the island. I don't know if you caught a paragraph in my speech, probably because I kind of messed it up a little bit, but I asked us to recognize that many of us serve as free interpreters. I'm going to do it for you right now, an interpreter. I said, even now, even here, even today, I meant this chamber when I said that, by the way, to explain that when powerful men dictate decorum and make demands over our bodies and our dress, it translates to the truth of an incomplete emancipation. It is colonization language. We know it when we see it. I'm translating it for you right now, so we can either revoke our previous vote that we recognize the harms that were done, or we can perpetuate it, but that's what this vote does.
Thank you. I rise in support of this amendment, and I was just saying that the definition of respect, I think, has sort of morphed into a little bit of an idea of control and conformity. And I simply just want to offer a definition of respect and what it means to me. The noun, respect, due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. As a verb, admire someone or something deeply as a result of their abilities, qualities, or achievements. In that, it says nothing about how we look and how we present ourselves physically. And I think it's really important to try and separate these because it's all about what we're doing and how we treat each other. So it's just simple for me, and I do support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I had not intended on speaking on this issue. However, I must admit that I was a little bit taken aback when I saw the amendment to the rules that dealt with attire of members of this legislature. I questioned first and foremost why we had redacted the section that had talked about attire completely and then put this under the section of decorum. However, I urge my clients, I'm sorry. We've been working very hard lately. I urge my colleagues not to accept and to reject this amendment for a more important reason. If you read the amendment as a whole, it indicates, and I quote, "The President of the Senate shall preserve decorum and order in the chamber," is seeking to abolish that portion of the rule in addition to the attire aspect. And I think that every area, and I don't think that that's a system of tradition or conservative behavior, or however you want to describe things that happen. Every body must have an individual who preserves decorum in its body. Without it, there would be chaos, as we used to say in college. And so, whether we agree or disagree with the presiding officer, it is the presiding officer historically who must maintain decorum in this building. Whether that decorum rises to the level of a collared shirt or not isn't for me to decide. What it is to decide, though, if one of us becomes disruptive, if one of us becomes disrespectful, if one of us uses vulgar language, any number of things, if one of us does not abide by the time limits that we have when we vote. There is any number of things that infractions that we may take. You need someone in the Senate to preside over that and to maintain decorum. So for the reason that this floor amendment seeks to eliminate the presiding officer's ability to maintain decorum in general, I would suggest that's a very dangerous amendment, and I would urge everyone to reject it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lombardi. Senator Corcoran.
I rise in strong support of this amendment. When I looked at the rules, I actually looked at the rule that was being deleted and this new one was being put in place. And it basically says, all persons on the floor of the Senate while the Senate is in session shall be properly dressed, does not say what types of clothing that is, and the presiding officer shall enforce the rule by appropriate means. So I'm not really sure what the purpose of this amendment is. We had a perfectly good line in our current rules. I can't say it better than Senator Acosta already did in regards to what this means to certain members of our community. And I just want to say, like, I worked in the IT field, and we did not have to dress in business attire because it was more important that employees were comfortable and were able to do their work and do it well than what they look like and what they were wearing. I also want to say, you know, I come here in a dress-down blouse, but if I was wearing a Mr. Bungle t-shirt, look it up, good band, I could still do my work and do it well. So I am in strong support of this, and I hope you will all agree to it and pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also did not plan on speaking on this, and I just went back to Section 10 on decorum. And there are still rules that will, and there is still wording in the rules that will still have quote-unquote decorum preserved so that no member of this General Assembly can use profane language, insulting, or abusive language, and that we are also remaining orderly and conducted during the Senate section. It is also not lost on me that respectability politics is often something that is used to control Black and brown bodies and female bodies, especially. I was a teacher in high school and high schools in New Bedford, and my first couple months of school, I came in dressed as a teacher. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, and came dressed in what I thought every teacher should be dressed in. I did not command the respect of my class, of my students, of my class, and I wasn't able to build a rapport with my students because I wasn't being authentic to what it meant to lead, and lead by example, and lead by being authentically myself, even in the way that I dressed. That did not mean I came into school with short shorts or crop tops. It meant that I relaxed some of the ways in which I dressed. My top button was no longer buttoned. I didn't have to wear stuffy pantsuits, and I was able to relate more to the young people who I was teaching and who I was in charge of. And I was better able to build a better relationship with my young people. Being one of the first Black queer women to stand in this office, I think it is important that we not only show folks the representation that they deserve to see in the diverse body that's here, but also diversity in how we present ourselves authentically as young millennials who are changing the way in which the world works, which no longer means that we have to have power pantsuits in order to be respected by our general body, but we can wear things that empower us and empower folks in our communities to then engage in civic engagement in ways that are welcoming and honor the fact that we want every single person in Rhode Island to feel comfortable and welcome in the State House, including the members of the body here. Thank you.
In the Rules Committee we had a week ago, we had a vigorous debate, I'll say a lively debate, on this topic. I want to thank Senator Acosta for bringing it forward. There were many discussions and viewpoints brought to the table on this topic. We are currently operating under interim rules of the Senate. So until the Senate passes these rules, whatever set of rules we pass, we will then have official rules for the session that we're in today, a year today, this session that's in 2021 and 2022. So those are the interim rules. Once we pass these, we'll have official rules. It's not about judging any of us. It's not about judging me or the way I look, or the way anyone else looks for that matter, based on their dress. For the members of the Senate who are not, you're unfortunate that you're not members of the Senate Rules, Government Ethics and Oversight. You wish you were members of that committee. And I won't enumerate all 23, but in doing some research, Mr. President, on the, via NCSL legislative bodies across the country, and I'm not going to enumerate and read all 23, but there's at least 23 states across the United States, both houses and Senate, that in fact have a, I'll say, dress code or proper attire, whatever words you choose to use. We're not unique in that regard. We are not an outlier in that regard. Some are very specific. Some indicate what you can and can't wear. To that distinct point, ours is very broad with regards to what's in the rules that we have before us. At the end of the day, we respect each other. The dress code and decorum are about respecting an institution that's 200 plus years old. With that, Mr. President, I recommend my fellow senators to not support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did watch the Rules Committee, and I did hear about the 23 states that did have a dress code. And I'd like to remind everyone that 23 out of 50 is a minority, and the majority of states do not have a dress code. So I hope that we can be one of them. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to also address the fact of what Senator Palma mentioned regarding the fact that these are broad rules. Let's really be honest about what we're talking about. These are not broad rules. They're more specific than the prior rules, which were broad. These are more specific. And it is very convenient and interesting to me that in a moment when we have the most diverse body, more women, more people of color, we find, this is me interpreting again, I'm going to explain it one more time about colonization language. This is colonization language. When there's more diversity, more women, more people of color, the need to remind everyone who is in power and what that looks like has traditionally, for hundreds of years, always started with what you do to their bodies, what you tell them to do with their bodies, what you tell them how to dress. That is what it is. So it is not lost on me that the previous language, which was broad, this is more specific. Now, why?
Thanks, Senator Mendes. The clerk will lock the machine. There are 7 votes in the affirmative, 28 in the negative, and the amendment fails.